Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I'm excited to talk about this new plan that CPE has rolled out. Obviously, we know that workforce is a key problem here in Kentucky. We are very low in terms of workforce participation. You all point that out as you release this new report. So obviously, it's time for Kentucky to take some critical steps, and it seems like you guys have laid out a great plan to do that. So can you talk me through a little bit of the plan that you all have released in terms of getting people who are adults coming back to school or people who are enrolling for the first time?
Absolutely, Jacqueline, and thank you for the invitation to talk about this. I guess I want to put it in some sequence first. As you all know, we have a North Star we call 60 by 30. And what that basically says is that 60% of our citizens in Kentucky, they need a credential that matters in order to participate long-term in the workforce, thus building the economy. And that's the direct correlation between, higher ed and the economy. Is a strong educated workforce. And that's what we're here. Now, there's several things that has happened over the last few years. One is we've had a declining high school number graduating. We've had a declining number of those that graduate from high school going to college. As a matter of fact, in Kentucky now, we have about 47.8% of those graduating from high school going on to college. We have about another 5% going to the out of state. And in many cases, we have those that are going to college and we're losing some of that talent to other states. So we use data a lot. We use data to tell us a story, no doubt, whether it's prescriptive analytics or predictive analytics. But we also need to use data to actually help us to make good policy. So in order for us to get to that 60 by 30, there's several things we're going to have to do. One is we have to increase the college going, no doubt, for in-state students. Number two, we're going to have to get more people from out of state to come, go to college and stay in state. Number three, we're going to have to increase our student success rates, even though we've done a very good job. I'll talk about that a little bit. In other words, better graduation, more numbers, more relevant degrees and certificates. And then number four, though, we have to get more adult learners engaged. We've lost about 50,000 in the last many years. And moreover than that, we have about 400,000 that's in Kentucky with some college and no degree. So we can't reach where we need to go unless we get those engaged. So this is what this plan is all about. You're looking at one of those four and really doubling down on some good strategic ways of making this happen. And so that the plan goes to exactly that. We've done a really decent job over the last many years filling middle-skilled jobs. If you look at our data, our Kentucky Community and Technical Colleges, we've really pushed them hard to provide, manufacturing and others with what they need. But we have issues like healthcare and a variety of other items we are definitely working on. But we just need overall more adults, no matter what area they're going into, to get engaged with a credential, because 90% of the jobs for the future of Kentucky will require some college credential of some sort, and it has to be relevant, obviously. So once again, that's what this plan is targeting.
Well, and like you said, there it is possible, because I'm from out of state and I went to school at WKU and I have stayed here ever since. So, everybody.
And we have benefited from that, by the way, very much so.
Well, I appreciate that. Everybody's moving to Nashville most of the time, but I came from Nashville, and Kentucky has a lot to offer to people already here and outside of Kentucky. And especially as, we're hearing so much about new announcements from the governor, whether that's Ford, things happening in Bowling Green, all around our Commonwealth. We're having a huge economic development announcements. But obviously, we're going to have to fill those jobs. So how do we make sure that people have the right skills? Like you said, we've done a decent job of making sure that people come out with some of those skills, but all of those positions that are opening up in Kentucky are going to require some kind of higher education. So how do we make sure we're addressing those needs?
Yeah, and that's a great question, by the way, and it's the right question to ask, because you hear a lot of people now getting jobs, $18, $20 an hour without any college. Please understand these jobs are the first to leave. And if you look at the unemployment during the recession and downturn, the people that were unemployed, those that were unemployed the longest, during COVID, you see the same thing where people with no higher ed credential. That obviously costs the state money because we have to, we have to increase our Medicaid or SNAP benefits. We have to, even in many cases, build more prisons, I'm sad to say. What we know is that manufacturing as we know of it today doesn't even look like manufacturing 10 years ago. What we also know is that technology moves so fast, and those industries are moving in here, whether it's, Blue Oval, no matter who's coming to us, all the ancillary companies around it, they're going to require some highly tech folks. Yes, there will be some on assembly lines. But once again, even if it's automobiles that we're building, it's not the mechanics of old. And so what we know is that a high school diploma can't get you where you need to go in the long term. It may get you started if you have an apprenticeship, but we also know we're going to have skill up after that. So the idea that there is a value piece to this conversation that, yes, you could argue that goes outside of the economic value. Whether it's civic engagement, whether it's better health. But bottom line, this is about us getting our citizens in Kentucky a good long-term sustainable job. We are, as you said, close to the last in workforce participation, even though we've moved really high up with those with a degree or a credential that matters. We are still going to need so many more as of now. For an example, we can put, 4,000 nurses to work as we're talking, as an example. Imagine what that's going to be 20 years from now. Imagine what that's going to be 5 years from now. So the idea that higher education has to work with employers on the front end to not only know what we're building, but to have employers to help us to build those. So we're making sure that these workers are both technically and have those employability skills, some people call them soft skills, that they need in order to be sustainable in the workforce.
Exactly. And like you said, we have a lot of people on the bench, if you will, in Kentucky, whether that's adult learners or people who are considering higher education. But I think a lot of the things that hold people back from higher education are things that you guys talk about in this plan. And that's financial aid, that's accurate information about what it looks like to go to school. So especially I think in Kentucky, we have a lot of interesting financial aid opportunities for people, especially at the community and technical college level. I think in Kentucky, we still have a plan where you can get a lot of that paid for. There's so much information out there that people don't have when they're making these decisions. So how will you guys bridge that gap through this plan?
Well, the point you make, once again, is a very good and clear point. As I've done my tour, 4+ years ago, I did a listening tour, and I'm back out on tour again. And 4+ years ago, we had about 3% of the people we talked with that knew we had free college. Mm-hmm. We have the Work Ready Scholarship. And not many more people know about it now, even though we've done big campaigns around it. We're not reaching certain population groups. So we are a high aid state, but not those that are needing those aids all the time get the information. So a lot of it is about people think they can't afford to go. Part of it is that we're not delivering that information in a transformative way to where they will understand. An adult learner may need to get that information differently than someone who's a younger person in high school. So we're going to have to expand the way that we are actually delivering it, aid toward that population group. We're going to also have to provide the kind of services that may look different than a traditional age person. If you're a traditional age student on a college campus, you're going to go to the advising center, or you're going to be able to somehow have someone point you there. If you're an adult learner, you may not be on the campus. And so we're going to have to figure out how to deliver that virtually and how to actually market it in a manner that they're going to get it. That's why we do want to work with employers more. That's why we do want to work with other community-based organizations. Why we want to work with the chamber. You know, why we want to work with a variety of other constituency, all the way down to local state government, local governments and state government, to help us to make sure that every student, no matter what his or her background is, will have that. But we also know our wraparound services may look different, not just in the way we deliver them, right? 3 o'clock in the morning when someone gets off the second shift. But by the way, we can do that. But also, many of the people may need certain child care, both men and women. But we saw during the pandemic, men and women were displaced. So we're going to have to rethink about what it means for us to be a full service institution. And I could keep on going forever with that. But what we have to do, though, and this plan calls for that, we have to holistically think about the learner, and not just the way we have been as institutions. So we're going to have to be learner ready, which means that we're going to have to change our traditional way that we have our institutions designed to be learner ready. And these are the sorts of items that we lay out really clear in our plan.
That's a great point. I know that the state, you know, in the 2020 session, we passed a bill about childcare so that employers can offer childcare as a part of employment, and that's a public-private partnership with the state. But people going to school need the same thing. You know, COVID has changed so much about the way that we live, learn, work, everything. So that is, I'm sure, a huge challenge for people looking at higher education and the higher education institutions in general. And you kind of answered my questions about what kind of partners you're looking for here, because it does take all of us working together to get this message out, obviously. And some people probably don't know, just like you said, people don't know about the free college. They don't know that they're going to be able to get childcare assistance through their employer from now on, potentially, if their employer opts into that. So it is a lot of education. And like you said, kind of meeting people where they are. This plan has, like we said, a lot of different prongs to it. What's your timeline on this plan and kind of getting the message out around these items?
Well, the timeline is now. I mean, we're already behind in my opinion, even though some people tell us we're ahead. Not in my book. So the timeline is now, but we're going to have to stair step it. We want to start out with some military focused areas. We want to start out by doing some credit for prior learning in a manner that can be used and documented, like with the military, whether it's in some form of a test or a portfolio, or some form that we can give credit. We want to also start out with helping our campuses build more competency-based education to deliver. So multiple pieces of this will be happening at the same time. We're obviously going to need resources. This is easy for me to say, but it's usually where people will go first by saying, well, we'll do this if we have money. I'm not going there. I'm not saying that. I'm going to say sooner or later we have to have money, but there's so many things we can do policy-wise, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many things we can do in being able to redevelop the focus of engagement pedagogically toward andragogy versus the traditional face-to-face pedagogy. I mean, there's a lot that we're working on currently, Jacqueline, that goes to make our campus ready. Now, when we start building programs out more in a more competency-based form, yes, a different kind of instructional design that will take money. But we are working with employers now in identifying the resources they have. And then, as a matter of fact, I changed CPE, as you all know, the structure of CPE to put in a workforce and economic development area that we have people that are willing to work with employers and work with the campuses to align up their needs and work together. I mean, this is how this healthcare workforce collaborative came about. So we're doing a lot of it as we're going, but we're stair-stepping policy, and we're going to be asking, obviously, the legislature to take part with us in doing the work we need to do. Now, some things we're going to have to consider also. We've got certain amounts of financial aid already in place. As I said, a high aid state. Can we use some of that financial aid? And which means we're going to have to change some laws maybe, or some policy levers to make this happen. But can we use that financial aid to be really targeted toward these population groups? Can we be able to have employers, the amount of money they're spending maybe in one area, to help them to say, you can use the same amount of money, but can we redesign it here for the kinds of needs that the person you're trying to actually bring into your organization can work with? So it may be less of a need to scholarship them out than it would be to do the child care, as an example, or be able to triangulate the dollars they have with the dollars that we have to offer, both at the state level and the institutional level. But a part of it too is, how do we create maybe even a lower cost way or a subscription way of helping many of these adult learners use their talents, their background, as well as their time to get where they need to go, and then let the institutions kind of be forward thinking about how they do that.
I think you're exactly right about it. Is kind of like an education before the education in so many ways. You know, at the chamber, we're trying to educate people on the fact that these jobs that we have open in Kentucky, you can make a lot of money. I think people are too far into a mindset that certain industries you can only make so much, but we're trying to lay out, and I know you guys are too, a path of, if you go into this industry, it would take you this long to complete school. With the financial aid, it would only cost you this much, and then you would come out and you would make X, which could be really appealing to people. I think people get really nervous about how much debt they're going to come out of school with, and then if they're going to be able to pay that back. And so obviously we're talking about people getting in for the first time, but also people going back to school. In Kentucky, and you may not know these numbers off the top of your head, but what are our retention rates like? So when someone starts school in Kentucky, how often are they staying all the way through to actually complete their education and get some kind of degree?
Sure. Well, I know that very well, as a matter of fact. And let me first of all give you the definition of retention, then progression, and then I'll give you the numbers, and then I'll tell you the way I think we should be thinking about it a little better. One is, retention is that if someone starts full-time one fall, they actually, and is degree seeking, and they come back full-time the next fall, right? That's retention. Mm-hmm. And the year before COVID, I tell people, most of our four-year institutions were around 80%, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's first and second year. Our KSU was about 10 percentage points below that. But then after COVID, that's fallen some, about 45 percentage points on each one of those. And we can expect that to be the case. Overall, depends on what institution you're at. We've actually increased graduation rates significantly in the state. The University of Kentucky has the highest. Then you got Louisville and Murray and several behind. So now our overall average is about, if you start degree seeking, listen to me, full-time degree seeking, and up to 6 years later, if you maintain that without dropping out or stopping out, we're averaging over a 50% graduation rate, which isn't too bad for a state like ours, but still more. Now, let's think about that for adult learners for a second. How many of our adult learners don't have some life incident that makes them drop out or go to part-time, but keep going? Right. They fall out of that category. And so we're not truly measuring the success stories here. or how many students for some reason didn't have money, decide to sit out for a year or two and work, and we don't provide them necessarily with scholarships at that point in time, but they come back to school. So we're going to have to rethink the way we are using also to help predict success stories. If you're a mother with 3 children or a father with 3 children, you're the only one in the household, you're taking care of somebody else too, like a parent, you know, if you are doing what you need to do with those situations and you're still going to school, even taking 6 hours, that person should be counted as a success story.
Absolutely.
And so I know our data and our data are improving. Let me brag a little bit more. We're closing gaps as fast as any other state. Over the last 5 years, and this is one of the COVID years, we're up now to over 50% of all of our citizens in Kentucky with a credential that matters, you know, and that's come a long way in 5 years. But we were also up the year before COVID. We're still at about 25 or 26% of increase in our underrepresented minorities. You know, we were at 41%, and that was twice the amount of our overall population. So we're closing gaps in all those categories, but we're still struggling with our low income. We're still struggling with our adult learners. So these are all the ways that we disaggregate data in a manner that helps us to target then the kind of policies we need to target in order to increase everybody. Because I tell people, if we leave anybody behind, success level.
Now, what's being done at kind of the institution level to make sure that people, kind of like we talked about earlier, stay in the state? So they come through, they're maybe an adult learner who's going back and they are getting their degree, but then they don't know where to go afterward. You know, I remember when I was getting out of school, my advisor was actually the one that sent me to my first job, basically. So has there been any efforts to kind of ramp that up, make sure someone is kind of doing, I don't want to say hand holding, but, you know, really helping someone through the process to make sure that they're staying in Kentucky and making sure that we can utilize their skills here in the state? Because obviously we're teaching people potentially for skills for jobs that they don't think are here, but hopefully that we can keep them. So what's being done at that level?
Another great question, and I'm going to answer that question with the piece of the question I didn't answer before. Now, let me start with the question before that I didn't fully answer. The great thing about Kentucky, we were the first state to implement a student's right to know. So you can go on our website, you can look at any major at any institution, tells you how much the average borrower make and how much money you make in that major X amount of years out, fully disclosing all of that so students can see. The second thing is we did a return on investment. We've done this more than once now that looks at all of our students 8 years after they graduated from high school to find out where they went and how much money they were making, what degree or credential they have. So we have all that kinds of data to show people the return on investment too that we tell people about up front. Some of the things we are having to do, and this is where, you know, organizations like the Chamber, as well as many other employers, need to be our partners, as well as others, to keep students in state. Many students leave the state. We saw this with engineering only because we didn't do a very good job of aligning them to that particular job that needed that person. So we were told over and over again by employers that, well, we're not getting the engineers we need, so we're going someplace else to get them. This is what we're doing at the council. My belief is that by 2030, every one of our students should have a work-based learning experience, either in high school or college. Now, people say, well, Thompson's pie in the sky. I say, nah, we're going to have to do this because it's best practice for student success and also for keeping students in the state. Number two is we're creating a graduate profile that allows within the curriculum, which is that what I call that equity item that crosses everybody, to incorporate those employability skills of problem solving, critical thinking, working with people of different backgrounds, civic learning and democracy. All of those items, we're wanting to incorporate them into our pedagogy. We want to have our students to have a capstone experience. We had too many students that told us 4 years ago, well, Thompson, you know what? I got this degree, but I'm getting out of college. I had no idea what to do with it. No one helped me. And, so we're doing that. We're taking career services now, instead of using it on the back end, we're putting it on the front end of having advising career service, aligning students with their propensity psychologically, sociologically, as well as career-wise, that allows them to go into the major that they really want to go into. Areas that we're going to have to increase on, and I'm happy to say we're doing that with the Commonwealth Education Continuum, we need to start this conversation in the 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And this needs to be moving forward in doing that, right? So if we get more people and all of these are in our policies that we're pushing, our campuses are starting to change that tremendously. We have several of our institutions now are saying we've got to focus on this adult learner needs holistically instead of one or two items. Those are the sorts of items that we're going to have. Now, to do it correctly, we're going to have identifiers. That's why we're wanting to work with the talent pipeline folks in your all shop. We're wanting to work with the local chambers and the local WIBs as we are. We're wanting to work. We are working, and we're going to be pushing it hard. We got to work with K-12 to build a systematic way of helping students to know that they have a plan to stay in Kentucky with a job. Not just that. I think we should get rid of this college and career conversation and just say the career, we're helping students get a career, and college is an intervening variable that you have to get there. And learning, and I'm not trying to make it all about the job. I am saying, though, it offers relevance to that degree or credential. These are all the holistic things that we all have to do together. No longer will I take this philosophy of let's just prepare students and then an employer will come and get them. No, there's no problem with bringing employers in on the front end and designing a way for us to actually connect that student early with the jobs that employer needs early. And once again, to do all this, it's going to take these partnerships I mentioned.
Absolutely. And I will say that there's been so much advancement in the last 10, 15 years. And just for a pitch to any employers who watch this interview, most universities now have a job posting board for internships and jobs that you can use the university. And those students look at that. At the chamber, we've hired at least 1 or 2 people from those types of postings. And that's been a huge help because people are, as you said, students are coming out saying, okay, now I have this degree. Now what? Someone help me. But if you put the job right in front of them, then that's very easy. And the universities are doing a really good job of that. And of course, like you said, I think that higher education and the business community and so many others are working together better than we ever have before. But is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want people to know either about the plan or what's happening in higher education at this point in Kentucky?
Absolutely. I think many people talk about innovation as something that happens after a happening, right? Like COVID. My argument is, and the presidents that I work with in higher ed, it's always been our argument that we are going to create innovation as we go. So we didn't want to look and see how COVID was going to affect us before we start interacting with innovation. And so that's the way we have to think about really developing where we need to go in the state. It's going to take the legislature, it's going to take the executive branch, it's going to take policy implementers like ourselves, it's going to take employers, it's going to take all of us. But the idea that we all have the same goal, and that's to create a strong Kentucky, a strong economy. We have the same goal of creating an educated workforce where equity is at the center of it, that we're not leaving anybody behind. I'm from Clay County, Kentucky. I do not want a situation whereby 20 years from now saying I did not make it my home county in ways that in fact helps them to get where they need to go. So all of this should be personal for all of us who are in Kentucky. It should not be siloed based. It should not be and saying, K-12, you didn't provide us what we need, so That way we're not going to provide employers with what they need. But it should be a way to build progressively out exactly we need. I would argue that higher education matters, no doubt. And I'm going to be arguing that till the day I die because I know it does. But it has to be something that we all believe truly as an internal and external value-based system. And to do that, Jacqueline, is that this is what I feel to be the strength of Kentucky that other states are recognizing. And although we are so much better than we used to be, and we're probably stronger than most of the states in doing what I'm mentioning, but I'm telling people we're just getting started. They haven't seen anything yet. Innovation will keep coming.
I absolutely agree. And just like you said, we're all on the same page. We're all on the same team in Kentucky. And I think that's where we're all starting to get a little better, and where I would encourage people to start telling Kentucky's story even louder. You know, we have to be our own advocates here in the state, and we can't continue to talk poorly about ourselves. We have to tell people why it's so great to be in Kentucky. You know, states like Tennessee, you don't hear them saying anything negative about themselves. I think Kentucky really has to start telling that story, and I think this is a great start. So I really appreciate you taking the time, especially while you're out speaking at a conference, to sit down and talk with me today. And I'm excited for the partnership moving forward between the Chamber and the universities.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the interview. Sorry for the telephone Zoom. Look up at me, I'm sure. But just know that, you know, what you folk are doing in Kentucky is reaping a lot of benefits from this partnership. So I want to thank you and Ashley and all the folks at the Chamber for our continued work together.
Absolutely.